And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. Generation X refers to people born after the 60s. In not even half a century, this generation has coexisted with three others, the Baby Boomer, Y, and Z. On today's Open Connection, we bring you highlights of the 2022 Nation in the Nation panel discussion, Generation of Change.
I come from Woodland Cree First Nation. My name is Hope Nitsika Sud Nigamun. My Cree name is Nigamun, which means song. Not nearly as cool as the wise lady, but still kind of cool. I manage the National Day of Healing and Reconciliation and the National Addictions Awareness Week on behalf of the federal government, and then went into legal education for an Indigenous-owned media organization. And I was very much not supportive of the amount of industrial activity and extraction in my traditional territory, but I was always a skeptic that the benefits didn't outweigh the impacts. I would come back to my territory, attend our community consultation meetings with the many proponents in our area, and I would be the one banging on the table like, okay, but you could give us 150 jobs tomorrow. We're not sober enough to take them. How are you gonna heal our community before we can deal with all of this increase in cash? We're not healthy enough yet. And I was very worried. We had a major project coming into our traditional territory in very similarly to the Haisla, not nearly as big. It wasn't the largest private infrastructure investment in Canada's history, but it was very big. And I was worried about it. And I would ask the questions about the care for our people and how we were going to get ready. And I asked enough questions that they then offered me a job. I accepted that position thinking, I'm going to be like a double agent. I'm really going to be there for my community, but I'm going to be there doing this job. I'm going to do a really good job of it. But I'm going to be on the lookout for, all of the things that I thought would be taking place. Like, when are they going to plan this next spill on my territory? Where are these racist conversations that I know I'm going to hear, these comments? And it was nothing like that. In fact, it was the opposite. They were hungry for representation internally in our organization and in our project. They were hungry for guidance on how to do things the right way, to work with my nation within right relations. And they were beyond accountable to our land and to our elders who were offering that guidance. And it made me realize, one, that everything I was afraid of about activity in my territory, in our territory, I was mistaken about. And that was really important, because then I got to really focus on those benefits. My eyes then turned to, whoa, how this opportunity is massive. My family has been likewise in leadership in my nation forever. My brother's our elected chief. He's been the Grand Chief of Treaty 8 First Nation territories. He's now the Chief of Economic Development for Treaty 8. My mom's been on council forever and literally started our nation as a breakaway from the Lubicon Lake Indian Band. And I realized just how much the benefits very much outweighed the impacts. And I got first look and first insight into that. And it made me realize how important it is to be here on the inside, understanding how accountable all of it is, and to who, and to how those conversations are going. And now I'm proud to be on a project that has some of the highest environmental standards in the world and is delivering some of the deepest, most meaningful benefits I've ever seen, and being realized in a community that is positioned so well in so many ways, and in a lot of ways because they lift their community members like Lisa into positions like she has now.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. In the early 20th century, there was a rapid increase in poverty on reserves due to imposed laws and policies. Canadian laws made it illegal for First Nations people to use traditional means of resource distribution and limited their ability to fish and hunt. Let us return to the conversation as Lisa Grant shares why her parents choose to live off reserve.
I never grew up on the reserve, and it was on purpose. So I see you looking at me. But there's a story to it, right? 3 families, and they are the pillars to my family. And it is slowly changing. However, there was 3 that moved to Prince Rupert. And they were the pillar of my existence, and they are the reason I am sitting in front of you today. And it was basically that I had to get educated. And so I do have to say that I'm going to have my dual master's degree in January, so it worked. I come from a fishing family. So we are commercial fishermen from Prince Rupert. And many times throughout the year, my family would be gone. So what I learned about family and, my mother's side particularly, because I have to tell you a story and it's going to go to baloney, I'm sorry, but I fought with my mother not too long ago, a couple years ago, and I was like, Mom, you taught me how to make gravied bologna. And she's like, no, I didn't. And I'm like, no, you did. She's like, I taught you curried bologna. And I was like, oh my God, no. Like, is my mother losing it? Like, I literally asked it, and it was my Auntie Carol. So that just showcases how our families are very important and how they are the pillar of our existence and, what we do as Indigenous people and people in general. You don't have to be Indigenous to have this. And so I grew up with 3 brothers that are 10, 9, and 7 years older. So I am a generation out of residential school. I'm a generation out of day school. And I see my cousin in the back, so hello, I will get to father's side. I have a basketball coach in the back. There's many actually in the crowd that I've actually, I see. We've played basketball, and, we're I like to say Indian country is very small, so each one in the room has helped build, the generation of change and where we are today. So I just want to say, on my mother's side, a lot of our community helped raise me because my aunts and my mom are my mom. And clearly I couldn't even remember, So Mom didn't teach me gravied bologna, but I know how to make it, so maybe I'll teach her. And so on my father's side, I actually have a relative in the back. So hello, I didn't get to say hi earlier. And we learned from Yaas, So my father, Yaas, didn't get to play with the little children, when he was younger. And so that knowledge was passed on. And so my father did not play with the little children so he could learn our ways and he could learn our traditions. And so it was quite interesting because, when you're thinking about that and you're growing up, and we didn't know anger, or we only knew anger. Let's put it that way, right? So my teenage years, I had to learn, many different things because of residential school, because of day school, because of all of, the trauma we've been put through. However, each one of them has put a pillar underneath me. And now, the only reason I went to do my master's is now the kids behind me have to catch up. Okay, let's be honest. That's why I did it. But they've built me up to this, and each person that's sat beside me and has had those conversations, and we've talked, and the basketball in the corner back there, even to the point of sitting on the basketball court, and he told me shoot the ball. You don't get that very often because a lot of your coaches tell you they get mad at you or they tell you not to do it. And I think that's really important, and we need to support each other and continue to be there. And you know, those little words of wisdom actually really do help.
My kukum, my grandmother, is a huge source of inspiration, and my mom, and my dad. I mean, they're all there. They're all here. But my kukum, and I was just talking about her yesterday to someone. My kukum gave birth to 21 children in the bush. She gave birth during a time where, while segregation may not have been maybe ubiquitous throughout the country, she wasn't allowed to give birth in the hospital closest to our reserve. And so for some of her kids, she had to go to High Prairie, 2.5 hours drive from my reserve. And we didn't get a road in until the 90s, until the oil field around my community was really rolling. And so for the most part, she gave birth in the bush. And in fact, my mom, who's third oldest, helped to help give birth to her siblings. My kukum, I was taught a long time ago, I was talking to one of my aunties about residential schools. The only one of my aunties who really tells me any stories about it, because for the most part, my family doesn't talk about their experiences there. But I asked my kukum, like, man, we were just talking about kids, and she was talking about how every summer at the beginning of summer when they'd come home, they would look for the baby. They'd be like, where's the new baby? Where's the new baby? There must be a new baby. And my auntie told me, part of the reason kukum had so many children and that we knew there'd be a baby is because they were always getting taken away. And that void, she was filling a void, wanting to have them home. And I think about my kukum's resilience. My kukum and my musum taught my mom and all of my aunties and uncles before they went to residential school. When you go there, gamuniao yan. You're amuniao. You speak that language. You biahtik. You listen to those rules. You listen. You stop. You listen to those rules. But when you come home, kanihiawin. You're Cree. You speak Cree. You'll live our life, and you'll be Anihio when you come back here. And my kukum and my musum, they refused to speak English. To my kukum's dying day, she didn't speak English. And because of that, if I knew my kukum had over 200 grandchildren, but she had a way of making every single one of us feel loved. I remember she went to visit my brother in law school at Victoria, drove all the way to the coast, and my brother was talking to her, and he said they were at like the Empress having tea or whatever, and he was like, "Isn't this great, kukum? Like miwasin?" And she said, and my mom was interpreting for her or for him. And he said, "Aren't you glad you came for this like nice meal and this nice tea?" And she looked at him and said, "Moya, kia, like it's not. I'm here for you. It's not about tea. I didn't come for this tea. I came for you." And she made every single one of us feel that love, regardless of that space between us and the experiences between us. And I think of her as her resistance to bend, to accommodate certain things, and to maintain that strength and that connection to who we are in our language and our culture, and what that's meant for me. I know and I understand my language because my kukum refused to give up on it. And so she's a big source of inspiration for me. And so is my mom.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. Indigenous people have often been depicted as living between two worlds. They have been described as living neither in the Indigenous world or in the Western world, but in an in-between world. Let's return the conversation as Hope and Lisa discuss this topic.
As Nihiawak, we talk about our bundles. What are we putting in our bundle, our medicine that we're bringing with us? So we talk sometimes about living in two worlds, one foot in the other, in our traditional ways, and one foot in our modern, and sometimes I could even compare it to my corporate life and this identity. Tell me how that shows up for you in your life.
This has always been one of the things, right? You know, you have one foot in one life and one foot in the other. And sometimes you don't always fit in one or the other, but you have to just show up and stand in it. That's where you're supposed to be. And it's quite interesting, and I don't tell this story often, but I just feel like I have to. My siblings that are 10, 9, and 7 years older, they have blue eyes, brown eyes, and then my sibling closest to me has the same color. However, and they were very light-skinned. And I remember in high school, I was just talking about this yesterday, and that's probably why it's coming up. They had to fight. They literally had to physically fight in high school because, and I didn't have to deal with this, and I believe that's why I was born 7 years after, is because now it's like we're two different generations, in all honesty. You know, they grew up in a generation where they had to physically fist fight for us and say, no, we're here, we're not going anywhere. And I remember we had to stop playing hockey because of this. And as Indigenous people, we are very athletic. Ask Hope. We played golf last week, and apparently
she's a natural.
First time doing an 18-hole. It was fantastic. It was great. But back to it is, you know, 3 of us were pulled out, and we could have literally played at university. I probably could have played, you know, for the Canada women's team, you know, and my coach was not happy. And we got pulled out because my siblings and I, they would hold us back. They would not let us go forward because we couldn't outshine the Gumsua kids. We couldn't. We weren't allowed. So we were held back, and my father said, no, you're going to hurt these kids. Like, you're going to hurt them because they're more athletic. And that was one of my first, and I was 11, right? So I'm in a different, you know, those two worlds. And I just remember being like, I never had the chance to go to the Okanagan and go to a hockey camp. You know, I wasn't allowed to experience that because instead of dealing with it, he took us out, you know, and now we're in a time where we can fight for it. We can fight for the equality. And I look at being on the economic development team as that, you know, so when we're sitting there, and I've experienced it myself, you know, sometimes boxes need to be made. They do. You know, and we need to sit at the table. We need to sit at the decision table because that's where all of the discussion is happening. So it's great to have community consultations. However, if we don't have, you know, and it's happening, it is, and I've been able to, I'm very grateful. I've seen it in, you know, growing up and being in the business world and starting school in 2011. But it's happening, and we need to be there. We really do. And if we're sitting in the back and you think we're not listening, we are.
My dad is Jewish from New York, and my mom literally grew up in the bush and went to residential school and is super traditional to this day. She lives in a cabin with no running water, and she wanted it that way. And my dad and her could not be any further apart culturally, really. But somehow they manifested this beautiful love and relationship.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
The seventh generation principle is based on an ancient Haudenosaunee philosophy that decisions we make today should result in sustainable world 7 generations into the future. In this final segment of Open Connection, Lisa and Hope share how this philosophy guide their decisions.
Yeah, that would definitely be the seat at the table. At the decision table, not the table you're going to tell us what to do. I don't like that table, and that's why I worked really hard to get here, to be completely frank and honest. So yes, a seat at the table, and it's the decision. I have to, I emphasize this in my notes, the decision table.
You know what? I think LNG Canada in particular, and especially my friend and colleague Craig, I don't know where he is. Oh, there he is. And especially Craig does an incredible job of lifting me up and lifting my voice in the organization at critical moments and times. And we often count on each other. I count on him for his ability to navigate these massive spaces, and he counts on me to bring some of this information and community and Indigenous perspective into our work. And it's this collaboration, I think, that we have, this healthy and meaningful collaboration, and his ability to know when those critical moments are to lift and make space for the Indigenous voice in the room and at the table. It's not only creating the space, but it's having the intelligence, but also the courage for people, our allies in these organizations that we're in, that we find ourselves in. If you have an ally, and I'm going to end on this and leave the last word to you, to the organizations in the room. If you have young Indigenous talent, leaders, people in your organizations, not only do I encourage you to create the space for their voices, but to lift them, amplify them. If they have a good message and it's going to bring value to your organization, both business value, or if we consider the triple bottom line, or ESG, I guess, in new world, new agey terms, lift it. Lift those ideas. Let them speak and bring that valuable perspective. If you want the room to know one thing that they can do, a tangible action that they can do to support young Indigenous leaders, what would it be?
It'd definitely be mentorship. And then another thing to consider is having our Indigenous workers come together. So do 2. I've heard a lot at the table, 1, but look at 2. And I'm looking, Dan, because I brought this up last week because it was kind of a profound moment where, when I went to Rio Tinto, I was actually very fortunate to go with another Haisla member. And the fact that we were there together, I'm going to say, was a huge reason why we stayed. You know what I mean? Because a lot of the time, being in this room is uncomfortable. Speaking in front of you is uncomfortable because of what we've had to go through. Our voice was never heard. And yeah, take 2 and really do mentorships and just, be there and show your face. That's another one too, because the more we see your face, the more friendly we are. And if we joke with you, we like you.
True, definitely.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.